Hello everyone. A warm welcome to join the C-Suite Talks. Elevate your journey today. Today we are joined by Mr. Prem Kumar, the CIO and CISO of eAge Technologies Pvt Ltd. And we have Mr. Thiruvadinathan, an entrepreneur, also a virtual CISO. Thiruvadinathan runs an organization named Vyuga Infosec. Our guests have a wealth of experience in the technology sector. We are excited to learn from their insights. Today, the theme is Securing Tomorrow, Conversations with CISO Leader. We have a small disclaimer. All views are personal and all based on experience over the years. Let's start the discussion. This is to Prem. Could you share your career journey?
Hi everyone. Good evening, good morning for all of you. I have been in the industry for the last 25 years. Started as a system admin at a training organization, and this is the seventh organization that I am there working. So I am working as in the capacity of a CIO and CISO for eAge Technologies India Pvt Ltd. We are an embedded based technology software development company. We have offices in India, UK, and US. Currently, looking up for their infrastructure and cloud security journey. That's about me, Vijay.
Thank you, Prem, for the brief introduction. This is to Thiru. Could you share your career journey, Thiru? Thiru?
Yeah, sorry, I think my mic was muted. Okay, so thanks Vijay and Prem. Thank you for having me. So a brief about me is, so I've been an Infosec professional, I would say almost for my entire career, except for the initial, 3 years. So I have a total of about 27 years, a little bit more than 27 years. So most of the journey has been in the capacity of consultant or and also on the other side of the table, which is primarily in the leadership role of either the deputy CISO or CISO or head of infosec and compliance program in the organization. So that's how my journey has been. So currently I'm running a boutique consulting firm, primarily offering services as as a virtual CISO, and also the plethora of consulting services around infosec, compliance and privacy. So that's been my journey so
far. Thank you, Thiru. Let's start our discussion on technical side. Mr. Prem, this is to you. What are the current trends and challenges in the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah. Okay. The current trends that we are seeing is more adoption of the AI and ML based technologies. That's the major thing that is happening in the industry. Where you see a lot of issues in terms of ransom attacks coming in, and cloud security concerns are there. Zero trust architecture being there, and IoT also is playing a major role. So if you look at IoT it's a device that is there which has certain data which can be penetrated and it can be exploited, right? So IoT, these are the five major pointers. One is ransomware, the other is cloud security concerns, AI, ML learning, security, zero trust architecture, and IoT security are the trends that we see in the cyber security landscape at the moment, and everybody is adopting and AI for every piece of work that they want to look at in the organization. Vijay.
Yeah, thank you, Prem. I see currently every organization is adopting this zero trust
Yeah.
concept. So every time we log into any organization's project applications and all, we have to enter and a security code, then only it allows us.
It
So I
is
can
not
correlate.
trusting anything there. That's the point. You
Yes,
cannot trust anything. You'll have to look at every aspect that is there, which is hitting your network or the infrastructure. So that's where the zero trust is playing a larger role here. Vijay.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Prem. This is to Thiru. What strategies do you recommend that will become successful in rising security awareness among the employees?
Okay, so this is definitely not the easiest question to answer, because I think people in the industry, they will, especially from the security team, they are pretty well aware of of this particular challenge. So primarily, it's been a big challenge, primarily because we have to deal with people here. So so it calls for a particular kind of mindset, especially from the security team, in order to deal with this particular challenge. Just like a consumer product, right, is getting marketed so frequently, security also need to be marketed within the organization, as often as possible by the stakeholders, not just the security team alone, because the entire stakeholders, right from executive management and all the um, line management and other leaders in the organization. So that marketing is extremely critical, so that the topic of security stays in everyone's mind, as green as possible. Otherwise, it's very difficult to maintain or attract attention from each and every person, because ultimately it depends on the contribution that has to be provided by each and every person, right from not just by the executive management, but it's right from CEO all the way to the lowest, or probably the least, role in the organization, like a security guard. So there are several ways, in which I hope I can take some more time to answer this
Yes,
question.
please.
So there are several ways you can do that. There is no right or wrong, but in order to constantly, obviously the security team needs to be at it, very constantly, and they have to look at different ways and means in which they should be looking at improving the overall security. So it's not just the mundane calling everybody into a room talking about it. It's probably the one of the way to look at it, but it's very old way of doing it, but it's still a valid one. Sometimes you will have to call every person. Maybe it's part of onboarding, or maybe as part of a yearly refresher, or as and when there is an update. So there are many ways you can, either in person or as a web conference call. And there are other traditional ways of improving awareness through free periodic email communications, or communication through other means, through public distribution system within the organization, or through posters, right? Or by organizing certain events specifically, towards such as conducting some games or quizzes, or online, quizzes. So there are multiple ways. But beyond that, so those are, those have been very, traditional. But beyond that, I think a change in mindset, especially within this security team, needs to be, brought about to see some real success in constantly improving security, which could be like, every security person should think themselves as as an entertainer, right? Because they have to be very good with people, right? They have to have good conversational skills, right? They have to be very jovial, so they should be easily approachable, and they should be constantly be innovating, right? So as simple as the meeting, there are any number of meetings can happen within an organization at any on any given day. So every meeting probably can start with, or can have something to talk very briefly about security, right? And then, and it should also be incentivized. For example, you can organize a lunch event, or even during normal, lunch day, right? Inside the cafeteria of an organization, you can probably offer, certain dishes based on, answering certain questions. So it has to be like, everywhere. So otherwise, keeping it very, very, professional can become very, very boring. Getting the attention of people also becomes, extremely difficult. And apart from that, there is, an age-old technique, which is, I don't know how, I don't think many organizations were willing to do that, but making it part of the overall performance management, not necessarily as a penalizing mechanism, but as a mechanism that, provides or adds some, brownie points to an employee, so that those brownie points probably can be redeemed, at a later point in time, right? Or some sort of recognition like this. So there are several ways in which, the organization need to look at, and they have to constantly, innovate in that particular, activity. Yeah.
Thank you, Thuru, for your insights. You emphasize that it has to be inside within the entire organization from the top to bottom. Everyone is responsible for the security compliance. Thank you for that. Prem, this is to you. Being a CEO and CISO, how do you foster a culture of cybersecurity within your organization?
See, leadership has to play a major role here. We have to take a commitment from the leaders that security is for the organization, and the organization has to invest, train, give the appropriate access that is required, and look at some kind of policies and procedures that are to be maintained and managed, and everybody follows that. So that's the major part that they have to look at from a culture perspective. You will have to look at having overall buy-in in all aspects that the organization is made secure. So whether it is training, access control, risk management, auditing, clear policies, review of policies, some kind of assessments. These are all very important for an organization to have as a culture on the cyber security.
Thank you. Creating a cybersecurity culture within organization is important.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Thru, this is to you. How do you identify and prioritize, cybersecurity risks in the organizations?
Okay, so it's a very, very, very broad-based question. So there are several, answers, and there are no right answers, to this question, because the fundamental challenge that every organization, especially this security team, would be facing is where to start, what to look for, right? How do we identify? So that's one of the that's actually a starting, trouble. So the best way to, look at it, the entire risk-based security program is you have to, start developing a very deep, or I would say at least a good understanding of, the organization that you are working for. So what the organization does for a living, right? What are their products and services? Where do they operate? Who are their customers? Which geographies, they are operating? What are the, critical data assets the organization has to worry about? What are the customer data assets the organization has to be, protecting? So it starts with a deep understanding of the organization, not only just the products and services, but also the technology stack, what kind of infrastructure they have, the current security, general practices, not necessarily security related, but of course they have to look at current security practices as well. So all this you are doing just to gain enough grip on what is that you are looking at, so that you will see some sparkles as to what risks, what areas in which you can look at. So this is one way. This is not just one way, but this will give you a starting platform for you to look at. Now, having acquired this particular knowledge or understanding about one's own organization, there are other places one has to look at, such as the internet, or even other vendors or consultants depending on how the organization, or what kind of, relationships an organization has. So at least the teams should be able to do a good amount of research, on the internet based on looking at certain industry reports. For example, like Verizon data breach report, right? So when you go through such reports, you will get a lot of, insights as to what are the prevalent, threats, what kind of threats are being more prevalent in the world, right, or in the industry that your organization is working. Like, for example, if I have to take an example, if you look at the, probably if I remember it correctly, the last, some of the reports that I've seen, the threats are mostly based on or targeting, a web application, right, in terms of, what is being targeted at. And similarly, if you look at some of the, attack vectors, then ransomware has been in the top 2 or 3 slots. So it will give you what is being targeted at, what is being, exploited, and how are they exploiting it. Again, if I have to quote one of these reports, then stolen credentials have been in the top 1 or 2, spots in terms of, how a given organization is, breached. So you have to look at so taking a cue from here, you have to look at whether in your organization stolen credentials can become a risk or not. So like that, you have to gather a lot of, these insights, both inside as well as from outside the organization. And you should also have an understanding of the management style, right? How management is inclined towards your approaches, and also your inside, your organization's, demography in terms of, people's mindset, the attitude, right? What kind of, priority they are inclined to give to security. So all these things, so everything ties down into the overall, tone at the top that has to be set by the organization, the security culture, the awareness and everything. Now, having yourself, equipped with all this information, you have to start somewhere. You still have sometimes, we'll have a question as to where do you exactly, start with. So that's where you have to start profiling the organization. You will have a business profile, technology profile, people get profile, customer profile. What are the customer requirements, regulatory requirements? So you have to categorize identify all these areas and categorize, your whatever information that you have gathered. They may be, they may not be really a risk, or you may not have really, put them down as a risk. But these can give you a good, starting point. Now, based on these, then you have to probably, it would be best for you to, choose certain framework. It could be an IST, right? It could be the good old, ISO 27001, or it could be even ISO 27005, the risk management standard. So you have to start somewhere. So you can keep this a recognized, framework as your guardrail, so that you can, guide yourself within that particular framework without, without wandering too much away from the framework. Now, with this, with all this information, you have to again start looking at, how exactly you would start assessing the risk, which is the good old way of, what is the threat probability, all those things you will look at. But before that, you have to, so that's the usual way that you have to take. But before that, you will have to have the right inputs, and that's how, you will have to gather. And there are several other ways also, like, you can do a scenario-based, depending on, what kind of technology your organization is using, right? Or what kind of, data that your organization is using. You can develop certain scenarios based on that. You will have to, you will be able to identify the risk profile of the organization. So from there, again, then you start going into further details in terms of, what is the probability, what are the existing controls, what are the existing vulnerabilities. So you have to do all these, calculations one way or the other, either qualitatively or quantitatively, or you can use a mix of both. But that's the nitty-gritty part of, how exactly you do it. But before that, you will have to arm yourself with the requisite information, like, having a good understanding of the organization, itself. So that would be the key. Or if I can just add one more point, if having done all these things, still if somebody would be having a problem, then the best way would be you have to start somewhere. So what you can do is you can start looking at a security baseline for the organization. So there are certain controls like user authentication, password policy, or in today's time, MFA has become a de facto standard for any kind of remote access. So defining this security baseline across different security domains, right? Whether it could be user access control, right? Identity access management, or it could be infrastructure security, it could be network security, or it could be an application security, right? It could be physical security. Set a baseline. So by setting a baseline, you are already raising yourself to a certain level. From that level, building on, it will be much more easier for you rather than starting from ground zero. So this can be another approach. So like just like reaching moksha, there are different ways to paths to moksha. So so the same approach should be adopted so that you keep your mind open to start looking at at different sources of information so that you can keep the program alive. So that's important.
Yeah, thank you, Thuru. This is very great insight on this identifying and prioritizing the cybersecurity risk. Yes, I come across IAM and the sector-wise regulatory compliance. For example, for our Indian banks, RBI come up with some compliance requirement and custom policy to be met to launch any like fintech products into the market. Yeah, thank you for that insights. This is to Prem that I'm sure that you are working on some strategies and tools, right? So this is related to that only. What strategies and tools do you use to mitigate the risk of cybersecurity effectively?
One is when you look at it from majorly is the risk management that we should follow. What are the risks identified? How much of the risks that are identified and how are they tracked? Okay, so risk monitoring becomes one more major part when you have a risk management framework put across. Similarly, when the risk management is there, how do we look at mitigating the risks? Are either you have a contingency plan, you have a scenario-based analysis that you want to do, or you want to move the risk itself to a third-party vendor, or you have an insurance that can take, say, if there's a natural calamity that is happening. Then how do you look at? We have a risk for the business to survive. We will have to move that risk to an insurance. That could be one of the possibility of risk mitigation. So you will have various, but that risks have to be identified, noted out, and tracked properly, monitored properly, based on which you will have to put contingency plans. Do a scenario analysis again for that. What can be given to the third party and what can be insured is what we should look at. The strategies and the tools that are there for effective risk management. So these are all major roles for an organization availability services that are to be taken into consideration. So these are the points that I think should be more looked at a strategic point.
Yeah, thank you, Prem. We all use new technology, and we onboard new application and software from third party and all for the organization, right? So this question is to Thiru. How do you evaluate the security implications of adopting new technologies like artificial intelligence, IoT, and cloud computing and all?
Okay, so this is another very important question that every organization has to grapple with. So without adopting, understanding the challenges of cloud computing and adopting, has become a thing of the past. But still, there are people worried about moving to cloud. So by that, by the time an organization figures out how to understand or move to make them cloud ready. Now we are looking at AI kind of new technologies. So what did not change is how an organization can approach such new challenges. Now it all depends on what is the what is the mindset of the organization, what is the affinity of the organization towards new technologies. Are they risk savvy, or what is the tolerance level of the, what is the risk tolerance. So there are a lot of things that you have to look at. Now, to be more precise, I wouldn't suggest. So again, it depends on the mindset of our organization. So if it is a traditional organization who had their traditional on-prem infrastructure, which were probably not even using virtualized technologies, and then move to virtualization. So that organization will have a different approach compared to an organization which started, let's say, in the last 5 years or so, right? They would have started as a cloud first company. So it all depends on the organization, right? And what kind of technology stack they have. Now, what does not change is you have to decide whether you want to jump right into it head first. So you have to be very careful. Just because everybody else is joining the bandwagon, whether you should also join the bandwagon, that's a tough call that you'll have to take. How do you take the call? So you'll have to figure out, I mean, you as an organization, including the security team, I think you will have to figure out what are your risk factors, right? Where you can what are your critical risks, critical areas, critical assets, and non-critical operations, right? Or non-critical functions, non-critical applications. So you will have to figure out where exactly you can introduce this new technology in a step-by-step manner, right? Rather than diving straight away into a given technology. So that way you will be able to take very gradual steps in terms of understanding more about, for example, AI in this case, right? So by the time you develop that understanding, you would have spent enough amount of time, and you become naturally ready to start expanding the footprint of or the adoption of new technology. So you will have to figure out, an organization has to figure out for themselves as whether they want to be the first mover or or early adopters, or they want to wait and or play the waiting game. So you have to start slowly somewhere. But in terms of looking at and evaluating, whether it is what kind of especially security or compliance or privacy risks that you might be running into by adopting it, you will have to figure out what is the nature of technology. And if I take AI as an example, primarily it's a software driven. Just like every software is prone to vulnerabilities, AI also has proven to be prone, to vulnerabilities. It's already, there are a few vulnerabilities already found. Certain things have been closed by, for example, in ChatGPT, also OpenAI has already closed. But so the point is, anything that is software based is prone to software vulnerabilities, right? And in every software application, use of open source components has been on the rise. So there are risks related to open source. It could be license violations, or it could be embedded malware within the open source, or any other coding errors or vulnerabilities within the open source package, various open source packages they are using in their software application. So that could be any number of such areas which one has to look at before you take a call whether you want to adopt a given particular technology. Having said all this, how do you tackle these security challenges? The approach remains more or less the same. You still have to look at how this particular technology is going to interact with people, process, and other technologies, including your own customer supply chain and product service that you offer. So you will have to map out those intersections where the data is going to be, whether the data is going to be impacted, right? So you will have to identify these factors and then take a very calculative step, keeping in mind the traditional controls that need to be enforced, such as having strong user access control, constantly looking at the technology stack for vulnerabilities, right? Patching. So these traditional controls have to be relied upon. And then, of course, if there is a supply chain, you have to also evaluate how well your supply chain is equipped and how good their security practices are. So again, this is a very lengthy question, so probably I will stop here. So if there are any further questions, further details to go, then probably we can delve deeper to that.
Yeah. So if I take the input from you, you emphasize to do lots of due diligence before we adopt any new technology or any software for the organization. With that, yeah, thank you, Thiru. With that, I'd like to ask you, Prem. All the organization would like to be, cyber resilience and business continuity to be ensured for the organization, right? So, as a leader, what steps do you take to ensure cyber resilience and business continuity for the organization?
Yeah, so looking at, we have four key areas that they have to look at very specifically. How do we, before getting there, how do we prevent? So prevention is one thing that they have to look at. What is allowed, what is not allowed, what are the URLs allowed for them, what is that. There should be a policy saying that these are things that are to be bound, and the awareness in the organization also should be that they are not to be browsing anything which is not officially related stuff on the premises. And preparedness for that also is one thing. How do we keep them there? There needs to be another set of trainings, awareness policies, like what Thiru said, some kind of awareness programs in terms of boards, some kind of questionnaire and stuff like that. That makes them ready for this one. Again, once anything is happened, then it is only response that you can look at. What is the response that we are affected? What is the response that we can look at? Where did this happen? How do we isolate? What is to be isolated? What is the level of this one? That's the response that we should look at. Final part comes into the recovery, where we'll have to look at, now that incident is happened, is it recoverable, is it not recoverable, do we need to take the last, when is the last recoverable point that we have? Okay, RTO, RPO stuff will kick in. So what kind of data is to be taken up? What is the kind of data that we can afford to lose? These are the things that they'll have to look at, and based on that, the four pillars are again prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. So their responsibilities for each of the things has to be defined, and each of the role has to be assigned and monitored properly, so that how do we talk when we have an emergency response team has to be formed, or these are the things that we'll have to look at for the resilience of the cybersecurity and business continuity happening in the organization. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Prem. The prevention and awareness is very important to avoid this response and recovery activity for any organizations. Thank you for that, Prem. Thiru, this to you. How do you navigate the complex landscape of cybersecurity regulations and compliance standards?
Yeah, Vijay, that's a $1 million question. So if I know the answer, the perfect answer, I wish I know the perfect answer. So,
yeah.
So here's what I do. See, like I mentioned, use of a platform, right? Like ISO 27001. So that should be, once always, a starting point. Now, having adopted an ISO-based, framework within the organization, that ISO also gives you, or requires you to go into different directions, right? For example, looking at what kind of regulations or compliance requirements would be applicable, right? It not only requires you to look at government imposed or industry body imposed regulation, but also from customer in terms of contractual compliance. Now, having adopted a standard like ISO, now you have to branch out into different areas. That completely would be influenced by the your customer demography, right? What are the different what kind of sectors industry sector that your customer belongs to, what kind of data that we are dealing with, how regulated their industry are, like for example BFSI, right? They're heavily regulated, and what kind of geographies that you are operating in. So based on these factors, you'll have to start identifying what would be applicable if I'm operating, let's say, in Brazil, right, or even Malaysia or somewhere, right? I mean, India is probably very late in the game in terms of coming out with the data protection law. There are several, South American countries also have already, come out with. So you have to look at the geography. What is, what would become applicable, to your organization if you are operating, for whatever products and services that if you're operating in a particular geography. So the geography, products and services that you are offering, the customer requirements from that particular geography or in general, right? So these are your, guiding factors. So based on this, you will have to identify, what becomes relevant, what kind of regulations or, compliance requirements become relevant to your organization, and then start going deep into that in terms of understanding, what that, regulation is expecting you to comply with, right? What are the implications of, both implementing as well as, not complying with it, because everything comes at a cost, right? And there are some organizational changes also would be required. So you will have to figure out whether it is a delta or it is something that you have to do, differently, right? From what you are doing currently. Right, so all these things, for example, GDPR has got some 6 or 7 principles, but if you look at our Indian government's data protection, digital personal data protection bill, there are only 2 principles, of point of very, prominent. So like that, there are, differences. So an organization may be simultaneously, may already be complying with, GDPR because they have something to do with their product and services, something to do with the European, continent, right? And maybe there may be an Indian company, right? So you will have to figure out, these nuances from in each and every, regulation, and then start, building on that, so that, building on the ISO framework, which you already, sort of, it may not be ISO, but it could be any such framework like, NIST, cybersecurity framework, or it could be any other framework. If you're a cloud company, you can use, CCM, or you can even use CIS control. If you have probably not set up something, or if you are not already an ISO, kind of a organization. So that's how, I would probably, navigate around the very complex, world of regulations, Vijay.
Yeah, thank you, Thiru. Yeah, your emphasis is correct. So yes, as you emphasize, we need to follow ISMS 27K and SOC, GDPR, PCI based on the industry and standard. Yes, thank you for that insights, Thiru. Yeah, this is to Prem. So, what advice do you have for organizations looking to embrace these technologies secured?
So organizations, first is best practices. What are the best practices? The security needs to be adhered as an organization. Then regular audits, whether it is internal, external audits, that has to happen. Then use of access control, as what Thiru was saying, in terms of who has the access and what kind of data is getting encrypted, where is it copied, or how is it getting accessed, who's processing it. These are the few things that organizations have to be clear. Now, as rightly what Thiru said is that DPDP bill and GDPR and HIPAA compliance and other compliances that are there, which come in various industries, and they have their set of guidelines. Those become the best practices for the industry to adopt, and with that they have to get trained also, saying that for this compliance, these are the documents or these are the policies that has to be looked at. So these are the few things that the organization have to look and embrace for their security posture to be accurate. I will not say the security posture is going to be perfect 100%. Then I think there's bigger chunk they'll have to look at. But to adhere to the policy as the best practices, we'll have to follow that policy as an organization.
Thank you, Prem, for that insights. Yes, this is very informative. This to Thiru, what are the hallmarks of your successful cybersecurity program? How do you ensure that if you are doing well in that?
Yeah, so this is another important as well as a good question. So every time our executive management asks us, are we in control, right? That's the toughest simple question. Even though it's a very simple question, that's the toughest question to answer, to be answered by any security person. So that's how difficult the question is. Now, to answer your question, see, there are different ways in which you can gain confidence as to how well your program, is functioning. Now, there are several areas, right? So you obviously have, again, if I have to take just for the sake of simplicity and, ease of communication, I will take again ISO framework. Now, ISO has got, let's say, 114 controls, 104 controls, right? Depending on what version you're looking at. So you can go by each and every control, right? Then you'll have to figure out what are the controls in which you can gather reliable data as to how well your control is actually performing, right? Let's say you have implemented an anti-malware program for your entire organization. What is your coverage? Is the coverage is 100%? It's good. It can be one way, one data point. And how frequently you are faced with let's say a malware incident or any kind of virus or any other kind of malware incident, and what has been the impact of such malware? Is the number coming down? Is the number very less? Is the number coming down? If at all it is happening, and every time it has happened, what has been the impact of the breach? So similarly, there are other areas like patch management or vulnerability management. So let's say if I take vulnerability management as one control area, what is your coverage? Are you covering all of your systems and applications, right? Or you're looking at only production, but not looking at development systems? So you'll have to figure out what is the coverage area, and based on that, once you've got the coverage, so coverage can be a good indicator, right? Then how frequently you are doing it. So every time you're doing it, right, whether it's a quarterly or a yearly, whatever is the frequency, every time you do it, what is the number of and severity of findings that you are coming out with every time you do the scanning? Is the number going down, right? And are you finding repeated vulnerabilities or repeated findings in each and every assessment? So those are all bad signs. So similarly, there are other areas like user security awareness. So you can conduct a quiz program and then come out with the results that will indicate where are we in terms of users, where your own people are in terms of security awareness. Similarly, you can connect a phishing test and find out. Then, if you are using certain tools for dashboard or any other tool for your compliance management, those tools will give you certain dashboards. Or even if you are not using a tool, you can still summarize all these different very technical controls, and then you should put them translate into a business language so that your leadership understands it. So ultimately it boils down to what is my current risk level. So you should be able to roll it up to that level. So you will have good once you have data points, right, it will automatically give you the confidence to translate whatever data, the metrics that you've been gathering into business language, to tell them what is the current risk, what is the level of risk or approach that the organization currently facing, what are the pain points, and how are we if you're already addressing the pain points, or if you need help in addressing the pain points, then you can highlight all those pain points by banking on all the data points that you have collected. So this will give you right eventually. If you are able to comfortably answer the one single question that you are faced with, like, are we in control by every executive management person, then naturally, if you are able to answer it, that itself is a big, I would say, hallmark of the success of your program that you're running. Of course, you have to keep at it, right? Depending on the changes that happen within the organization, different technology impact of different technologies being adopted. But that's a constant, that's a continuous journey. But this will give you enough data point as well as confidence as to, to tell confidently to anyone or communicate, within your to your audience how well your own program, is functioning.
Thank you, Thiru. Yes, you emphasize to continuously monitor and have very close calls on this. Thank you for that. Probably we'll go with a couple of questions, and I request the audience to, if they have any questions, please raise your hand so that I can enable you to talk. This is to you, Prem, sir. What advice do you have for aspiring CSOs and or looking to advance their career in cybersecurity?
Continuous learning, sir. Nothing else. You'll have to learn because the security landscape is so big in terms of the tools, the technologies. You'll have to develop your skill. You'll have to keep learning some certifications on the niche technologies. Skill gap is, there's been a lot of skill gap that is there after the AI and ML stuff is come on security. There are people who are required for certain cases where we have no pool of people available for us to take in the security side. So if you look at, again, it is more to look at develop your skills, learn on the job, learn new skills, do a lot of certifications. A lot of free certifications are available, like OneTrust gives you this one, Privacy Ops gives you free certifications. These are new technologies that are there, and Privacy Ops is going to be the next thing with the bill and other stuff. Everybody is looking at the individual data now, right? So we can look at these new trends that are there on the security side. Leadership also plays a major role, saying that leadership direction is to look at how the data is. So every organization has to process data now, and that way of processing, who's going to process, how much they can retain, all these policies has to come in the privacy ops side. With the DP Act coming in again in India, we are very new. The board has to be formed and other stuff, right? So still we are on the, we have just started to look at our data on how data has to be processed. The Aadhaar card and other data is freely available now. That has to be strengthened, restricted, processed, and deleted as well. So these are the skills that they have to look at, make themselves ready for the next this one. Cybersecurity is going to be here because the adoption of cloud is becoming more and more, and many people are moving their workloads to the cloud. Now microservices being major, where Kubernetes is coming is there already running major of the workloads, and people have to look at cloud security posture. Their skills on zero trust will help them. Ransomware is one thing. IoT device security is one thing. So these are the skills that they have to look at and take it forward. That helps them to grow in the security side, line of career, right? So
yes, thank you. Thank you for the important thing is the continuous learning and skill development. And there are lots of organization who provides a certification from their any organization in
three
the ground.
certifications that are there, Vijay. So
Yes,
they can take, and there has to, they have to attend some of the 4-hour or 5-hour sessions that are there. They give you the certification. It is online only. You don't need to go to Prometric test or testing centers or anywhere. OneTrust is one, and Privacy Ops is another place there where you can get yourself certified on the latest trends.
yeah, thank you, sir. I'll follow that. This is to Thiru. How AI can be leveraged in improving cybersecurity posture?
Okay, I think Vijay, to answer this question, I think it's up to one's imagination how one can use AI. For example, I would say AI is capable of. Okay, so before I take a very rather very imaginative example. Let's say see, patch management and vulnerability management is a very frequent affair that every security team has to grapple with. Now the way the currently even if we are using very advanced tools, right? It requires manual intervention. You will have to plan for downtime. There has to be several communications depending on what server that you are looking at. People doesn't want outages, doesn't want downtime. The moment you're saying you're going to you will have to restart, and whether it will restart successfully or not is a problem, perennial problem that every organization is has been struggling with. Now what AI, in my view, I'm thinking out loud. So if AI is capable of what it is being boasted about, then AI is a perfect tool to handle, to completely automate patch and vulnerability management. How? In the sense, see, AI can be a program. It can be like let's say a virtual cyber cop, right? Again, which is completely driven through software, right? So like an agent or server, controlled at from a central location, it can be configured and controlled from a central location. So what it can do is, it can keep both the patch management as well as vulnerability management as a continuous activity. Now, one of the things that one of the key challenges every time you do a patch assessment or vulnerability assessment, you are presented with a huge number of findings at different levels of severity. Now, you'll also need to find out what is the exploitability, whether there is an exploit available for each and every finding, right? Whether the finding is, if it's a low finding, what is the call you will take, right? If it is a high severity finding, but there is no exploit available, what is the call you will have to take? So all these calls can be automated, right? And even the time windows can be automated. For example, the AI should be capable of deciding based on the availability of exploit and the severity rating. It should be able to make a decision by itself whether to apply a patch or fix the vulnerability, right? If it is a software related vulnerability that doesn't require manual intervention, we are living in the days of a lot of automation, so even automation is should be possible in case if it requires changing the configuration file of a web server or whatever, right? So similarly, in the case of vulnerability management, the same concept can be applied. Now you can also use different windows instead of the AI should be intelligent enough. Naturally should be intelligent enough to find out what is the lull period or what is the period in which a given application system is not being used, right? That time window can be chosen by AI tool to apply a given patch and see if it successfully the server application restarts. If it doesn't restart, then you should also have the capability or intelligence to undo the change, right? So that you can avoid spending a lot of time in asking for downtime, permissions, approval, all those things, right? And then automate the whole thing, bring down. So and as and when, for example, as and when there is a new, in case today you are doing an assessment, you have a finding, right? So let's assume that some of the findings do not have a exploit available, but tomorrow there is an exploit available. The AI tool should be perfectly capable of finding out from the threat feeds that it should have that there is a new exploit available for the vulnerability that your already organization is facing with. Then take a decision to apply it, right? The whole thing can be completely managed by AI tool, right? So that I would say. There are, again, it's up to one's imagination. It can be, it's already being used to write reports for a pen test, right? So many other things. So I think it's left to one's imagination as to how one can use. Of course, it also depends on the capability to be developed by using AI based programs like ChatGPT or in the recent GPT-4, whatever is the latest version, whatever. So that capability has to be developed. But once it is there, I think it's only it's limitless, I would say. Yeah.
So I would like to add to what Thiru has been saying, right? So looking at new chat GPT and stuff, right? There are concerns of security that has been raised already because copyright is become a challenge. Data from books have been taken which are copyrighted, right? That could be a security threat. So how the organizations and what is the use cases using AI are to be defined and adopted based on the business need. So that is more important when you look at AI.
Yes, Prem rightly said. Thank you, Thuru and Prem, for your insights on AI. Yeah, organizations are keenly looking into that and try to leverage better, as you mentioned, that they have to follow certain security postures like CSPM and other products they have to. Yeah, thank you for that. This is a time to hear from the audience. We are open to get a Q&A from your end. Audience, please raise your hand if you have any questions to the speakers. Yeah. Meanwhile, we can discuss one more question. And this is to both of you. What are the key complaints, challenges you have encountered? Maybe you can share your experience.
So you want to go first? Okay, so let me take a stab at it. So Your question, key compliance risk, right, Vijay?
Yes, key compliance challenges you have encountered in your
Okay, what
experiences. Yeah.
we have encountered.
Some of the scenarios you can share.
I think, I mean, there are several, but of late, GDPR has become, the one of the greatest, challenges because of the way GDPR is applied, right? And various expectations, compliance expectations around that. So figuring out, especially figuring out where in your organization, right, you have all your personal data, right? That itself is a major, challenge to figure out. That itself requires, calls for use of significant amount of technology to figure out to unearth from your organization all the places where you have personal data. Now, personal data is everywhere. Even when you are sending, exchanging communication with the customer, you do have personal data, like as simple as a customer's email name, email ID, contact numbers, official address. All those things are there. So figuring out where do you draw the boundaries, right? How do you characterize each and every use cases based on the set of personal data attributes, like whether they are direct identifiers or indirect identifiers or biometric or political opinion. So you'll have to identify different buckets or categories of personal data that you'll have to that you have identified. So it starts with a complete uh, uh, full use of technology to unearth all the personal data, start categorizing them. So this is one of the this has been one of the greatest challenge of it recently. So the way we went about doing it is you have to rely on technology, and it's a time consuming process, and it's an iterative process. So it calls for a significant amount of patience. There can be a lot of backlash because even certain organizations, right? So they make a distinguish between the business contact information from rest of the personal data. For example, when I say business contact information, the very basic information that one organization needs to communicate with a prospect or vendor or customer, like name, email ID, phone number, right? So those will be you cannot put too much restrictions on that particular type of data, because if you have to do, then you will have to essentially restrict all email communication. So you will have to look at the business requirements, understand the mindset of the people, your own risk of not doing, risk of not complying with GDPR. So I mean, so you will have to go through this particular phase. I mean, luckily since it's been I think almost 5 years. I think it came into effect around 2018 May. So I think it has given quite a good amount of learning, probably to, of course, to many organizations, because almost every organization a global organization has to deal with one way or the other the European personal citizens personal data. So I think this has been, and that also gives a lot of data points or insights into how you can improve your overall security program, right? So it can open yourself up into new insights which previously we were not aware of, by way of handling as simple as even implementing data classification, right? Data classification is extremely critical when you're talking about not just for security, but definitely for privacy. So it will give you new insights into how you can look at data classification, implement it. So it can provide such new perspectives even to your existing program and controls. So that has been a I mean, fantastic learning for me, at least in the last few years.
To add, see, as right Thiru said, so we have changing regulations based on new findings, right? The regulations change, the retention changes, then you'll have to look at what kind of data has to be processed, how long to be retained. So the data privacy becomes more important, right? To summarize, then coming into how the card payments are being checked and how data is being stored. Should the devices hold the data of the cards that are being swiped? just an example. What I think Rama Sangli has a question there, Vijay.
Yes,
So,
I think you are covering that question
I'm
also, I
covering
think
that
so.
question as well, Rama.
Yeah.
So, see here, what we see here is blockchain. If you say we are still at a very early stages of adoption to the distributed ledger thing, but there are points and few places that are being accepted with the digital currency which the Indian government is bringing up. So that also would be one of the pointers that could look at blockchain and distributed this one. Now, looking at this banking watches, cardless payments, the security side that is there is that you don't see the number, or there's a hash that happens at every level of transaction that happens on transaction, right? So these devices only don't carry that kind of data that is there like what we do it in our online portals or something like that. This is one time transaction, and there is an OTP generated based technology that has been adopted, right, for cardless payments and stuff. There's one OTP. Now if you really look at the NPCI had recently started digital banking stuff where you don't need to take a card. You have a QR code comes up in the ATM. You scan the QR code. It comes with an OTP, and you get the cash out. So that's the point that is there from a technology standpoint. There are a lot of security flaws that they are finding out, but it's in the work in progress is what I would say, Rama, on that. Otherwise, looking at entry, you will have to know your customer also, what kind of a customer this guy is, what kind of challenge that is there, how frequency, what is the frequency of his transaction. That gives a pattern of say spending for the banks to look at. So now if you look at a card being used here and you just swipe it abroad, you'll get a call immediately saying that there is something that is there. That's the anti money laundering system that has been in place for the banks to look at each transaction at a very minute level, right? So that's the security that has been put around, right? Rama, did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you, Thru, for the insights. And Rama, I hope you got the answer from Prem. From audience, do you have any questions? Please raise your hand. Okay, Rama said basically handle an app. Yeah, thank you for that, Rama. With this, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you, Prem and Thiruvadinathan, for your great time and great insights on the questions. And it was a great learning session for me and for the audience as well. With this, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vijay. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Thiru. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.